What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my Week 12 quarterback start sits. So talking about all 32 starting quarterbacks, listing them as either a start, fringe option, or a sit. The starts are going to be your QB1s you feel very confident throwing into your lineup. The fringe options, more like your back-end QB1s, high-end QB2s. They're probably not going to be the strength of your team, but they are potentially startable in there. And then the sits are obviously going to be players that you would prefer to keep on your bench. We're just going to dive right into the first Thanksgiving game with the Packers taking on the Lions. And for the Packers here, I would have Jordan Love as a fringe option if this team was healthy, but this Packers offense is very, very banged up right now. He's going to be probably without Aaron Jones for sure. He's got some wide receiver injuries. Luke Musgrave's going to be out, so just not a lot going right here for this Packers offense. So I am going to have Jordan Love as a sit, even though he's coming off a pretty strong game in Week 11. And then for the Lions, I'm going to have Jared Goff as a fringe option. To me, I feel like this is going to be a game script that's going to be looking pretty good for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I feel like the Lions are probably going to be up for the majority of this game. I don't know how much passing volume Jared Goff is actually going to have to put out there. And even, throughout this entire season, Jared Goff has been more of a fringe option. So that's what he's going to be this week. Now, in the second Thanksgiving game, we have the Commanders taking on the Cowboys. And for the Commanders here with Sam Howell, he's been a quarterback one in terms of points per game. I do think he has to take somewhat of a hit here going up against this Cowboys defense. So he's going to be more of a fringe option for me this week. In a better matchup, he would be a start. For the Cowboys and Dak Prescott, I feel very, very confident firing up Dak this week. He's been very impressive over the past few weeks. I love this matchup here against the Commanders. I think Dak and this Cowboys offense are going to be putting up some points. And then in the final Thursday game, we have the 49ers taking on the Seahawks. For the 49ers here, Brock Purdy coming off of a perfect passer rating game, obviously surrounded by top weapons, and a pretty decent matchup here against the Seahawks. I like Brock Purdy as a solid quarterback one start. And then for the Seahawks here, we'll see if we get Geno. Even if we do get him or Drew Lock are both going to be sits for me. Tough matchup here against the 49ers, and Geno Smith really hasn't been a super startable quarterback throughout the season. In the next matchup, we're going to have the Dolphins going up against the Jets, and I'm going to have Tua as a fringe play. On the season, he's been more of a back-end quarterback one. Not a great matchup here against the Jets. This kind of feels like a game where the Dolphins are going to go ahead early. Jets are going to struggle to score. The Dolphins are going to be able to run it out with Achane if he's healthy. Raheem Mostert, I don't know how much passing volume there's going to be, for Tua kind of attacking the strength of this Jets defense. So Tua's going to be a fringe play. Definitely going to be sitting Tim Boyle. If there is a quarterback in the NFL that's could be starting that's worse than Zach Wilson, it may be Tim Boyle. Not optimistic at all with him heading into this one. In the next game, we're going to have a divisional matchup between the Saints and the Falcons. I'm going to be sitting all the quarterbacks here for the Saints, whether it's Derek Carr or Jameis Winston. Both those guys are going to be sits for me. And then for the Falcons, they're going back to Desmond Ridder. Don't really love it for the weapons, but it's not like Taylor Heineke was a relevant fantasy quarterback in one quarterback leagues. Another game with a very rough quarterback matchup, Steelers taking on the Bengals. We'll see how Kenny Pickett looks with a new offensive coordinator coming in. Matt Canada finally fired, which I think is great news. It can't get any worse moving forward, so we can only hope for some improvement, but definitely not going to be firing up Kenny as a start. And then unfortunate news with Joe Burrow out for the season. Definitely don't want to be playing Jake Browning in this one. So two more sits. Then we're going to have the Jaguars taking on the Texans, and we finally had a boom, high ceiling game out of Trevor Lawrence. Really like to see that. I think a lot of people thought he would take that next step this year for fantasy. It hasn't really happened so far. Maybe he'll start going on a roll here after Week 11. So I have him as a fringe option, probably more of a high-end QB2. Not totally bought in rest of season, but we'll see how he looks here against the Texans. And then for the Texans, we just have to continue to ride CJ Stroud here. Even though he's coming off a game with 3 picks, it was still a solid fantasy day. I think he's going to continue to put up solid numbers here against the Jaguars. Rougher quarterback matchup with the Buccaneers taking on the Colts. Baker has been fringe worthy in other weeks, but with no buys, 32 different quarterbacks, I would definitely prefer to keep Baker on my bench. And then for the Colts here, Gardner Minshew, also going to be a sit for me. Just hasn't been giving you that top fantasy production at the quarterback position. Another pretty brutal QB matchup, Patriots taking on the Giants. Definitely going to be sitting Mac Jones. And even though Tommy DeVito had a pretty decent game in Week 11, it's not something I want to be banking on here in week 12. I just feel like his weekly floor is very, very low. And then we're kind of going to continue the rough stretch of quarterbacks here with a rookie matchup. Bryce Young going up against Will Levis. Definitely can't be considering playing Bryce Young in this one. Just hasn't been giving you the production you need. And then for the Titans here, Will Levis definitely cooled off after his crazy debut as a starter. Also, just not a great matchup here against the Panthers. Teams have really been able to attack him on the ground, not as much through the air. Could also be a game script thing, but I think that could also apply to this one. So going to be sitting Will Levis also. Pivoting over to the Rams-Cardinals matchup. For the Rams here, I do have Matthew Stafford as a sit. Even in a solid matchup here against the Cardinals, he just hasn't been giving you that fantasy production that we've seen out of a ton of other quarterback options this season. So that's why he's going to be a sit for me. Maybe if he gets Cooper Kupp this week, dealing with that ankle injury, then maybe you could consider him a fringe play, but I don't know. He really just hasn't been putting up production this season and still dealing with that thumb injury. Definitely doesn't seem like he's 100%. And then on the other side for the Cardinals, I like Kyler as a start. I don't think he's necessarily played at the highest level in terms of real life NFL or real life football through his 2 weeks back, but the rushing production is there. I think he's just going to get more and more comfortable and should continue to improve moving forward. We're going to have a tougher quarterback matchup here with the Browns taking on the Broncos. For the Browns here, there's just no shot. I'm starting DTR. Hasn't done it fantasy-wise in his 2 starts. And then for the Broncos, Russell Wilson has looked far better this year than he did in 2022. But fantasy-wise, it hasn't necessarily translated. He doesn't have a ton of volume. The touchdown to interception ratio is nice, but fantasy-wise, he's still a mid-tier QB2. And then you factor in the tough matchup here against the Browns. Would not want to be playing Russ in fantasy. We're going to have a divisional matchup between the Chiefs and the Raiders. Patrick Mahomes coming off that game that everyone watched. A lot of dropped passes. I still think you go back to the well here with Patrick Mahomes. I think they're going to be able to put up some points here against this Raiders team. And then for the Raiders, definitely going to be sitting Aiden O'Connell. Only want to be touching Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams in that Raiders offense. And then we have the Bills taking on the Eagles. Probably the best quarterback matchup this week. You fire up Josh Allen, you fire up Jalen Hurts, you don't think too much about it. Both high-end QB1s rest of season. And then another pretty nice quarterback matchup, Ravens taking on the Chargers. For the Ravens, I love this matchup here for Lamar Jackson. I think he can put together a really nice game here against the Chargers. And then I did have a dilemma here with Justin Herbert because in a normal matchup, Herbert would be a locked-in start. He's been super impressive this season, even though he doesn't have a ton of great weapons around him. But the Ravens have been pretty much a death sentence for opposing fantasy quarterbacks. They're giving up by far the fewest points per game to the quarterback position. So I do have Herbert as a start. Looking through those Ravens matchups, they haven't necessarily faced a murderer's row of top quarterbacks. So I think Herbert could still be fine. He's probably more towards the bottom tier of starts compared to where he would normally be. But I'm still going to have him as a startable option this week. And then the final game of the week, Bears taking on the Vikings. For the Bears, you fire up Justin Fields and his rushing upside. I'd say he looked pretty impressive in his first game back. As a passer, he looked nice. Had over 100 rushing yards, I believe. I think he almost had 20 carries. So that rushing volume is going to be there. Love Justin Fields. And then for the Vikings, I feel like we just have to continue to roll with Josh Dobbs. He's had a few impressive games since coming over to the Vikings, and he has a nice matchup here against the Bears. I also like Josh Dobbs as a start. So that's going to wrap it up for all the Week 12 matchups. Hopefully this helps you figure out your quarterback position this week. If you guys enjoyed the video, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Check out the tight end start sits, which will be coming out today. But thank you all for stopping by. I will see you in the next one.